could start
Sure.
again.
All right, calling the meeting of the Reinvestment Committee to order and quick attendance. Andre Comer,
Present.
Corey Betts,
Present.
Avery Gaddis,
Here.
Severa Gordon, not able to attend, Michael Jefferson, John Name present, and Paula Robertson.
Present.
And welcome to all of our fellow council members who were also able to join in. So on the agenda for today's meeting is review of the reinvestment notice of funding availability, or the NOFA, based on our discussions on Monday to focus around the NOFA being open to grant making organizations to support the work that we need to get done. I believe Executive Director has shared the most recent draft for review and discussion today. Junior Ray, would you like to pull that up and walk us through it?
Sure.
And I would just, if you have questions, as Junior Ray is walking through it, please just raise your hand and I'll make sure we get to them.
Can you see my screen?
Yep.
Okay. So I don't know if anybody has any questions on the NOFA, but I went back through with comments from members of the committee, and I clarified the areas around the eligible uses of funds. And I just put this in there so that the grant, and we're calling them grant managers, the folks that will apply to this NOFA, we're going to call them grant managers, and the people and organizations that will apply to them, we're calling them community grant applicants. So I wanted to clarify that the community grant applicants can apply for things like these expenses. And so I wanted the grant managers to understand kind of where we were going and what we were looking for the monies to be used for, so that they could respond to us in with their experience and knowledge of these kinds of grant making applications. And so again, I did the non-eligible use of funds, went over that. So there's a couple of questions on this, and again, maybe we could do this in the details, but for the grant management budget period, so these grants, do you want them spent 12 months, 24 months? So we'll have to decide what the budget period is, up to 6 months to complete the application period. I've had folks calling me and just kind of giving me information, so I'm just kind of putting it in there for discussion purposes. So I did get a call, it says up to 6 months to complete the application period. So and then 12 months to complete the programs or the projects. It could go 24 months, whatever the council would like to see.
Junior Ray, can we pause there? I think we're going to need to break that down just so everyone's aware. But before we dive into that, I know Drea has her hand up.
Okay, sorry,
Yes.
I can't see anybody's hands.
No worries. Just going back up to the discussion around the uses. And I know I may have put this in the comments. I'm struggling a bit with community reinvestment dollars going for some of these things. I don't, there are existing funds, whether it's CDBG money, whether it's from foundations or even the state community investment fund. I feel like there are other opportunities for entities to get these costs offset. I do not think that we should be in the business of providing community reinvestment dollars for equipment and supplies and lease costs and travel. I'm really having a hard time with that. And in terms of the timeline for completing the grant application, I feel like giving people 6 months to complete the grant application is quite a bit of time.
Yep. So let's, Junior, can we actually take it section by section? Because I think we jumped the gun here a little bit. Let's start all the way up top.
Okay.
And while you're going there, Councilmember Gaddis may have had his hand up, but it might have gone down.
No, I put it down so I wouldn't forget, but I align my comments with that of Councilwoman Comer. I think even though we're pressed for time, because that's the reality and constraint we're dealing with, I think we're missing an opportunity to be very thoughtful and innovative. From what I see on this sheet, there's nothing here that differentiates us from another program. And as the previous council person spoke and said, there's enough programs that deal with rental assistance. And this is, I really don't like this, and I'm gonna have a hard time supporting this the way it's presented right now. I'm looking to plug gaps that are not being filled, and I don't want municipalities or the state of Connecticut off the hook by funding initiatives that they should be funding. There's no innovation in this document. That's all I have to say, Madam Chairwoman.
Thank you. And just to, my understanding of the eligible use was, let's say someone had a new program they wanted to either expand the impact of, or brand new program they wanted to bring to market. And part of the program costs included or required them to, rent out space for certain sessions. My assumption was that's what those eligible use of funds meant. Not
Yes.
that those funds should be used for, renting and leasing facilities or equipment for your entity as a whole. So I think we need to clarify that, where if you scroll down a little bit, the eligible, sort of the focus areas, right? Eligible projects funded using the grant award is the focus area that we have discussed, and I think there's some questions in there that we can get to. But the eligible use of funds, I'm not sure if we need to include that, because I think that can be very confusing between the programming type that we're looking for, and then I think I think those organizations need to say, hey, I'm looking to launch a new training program for those that were previously incarcerated and coming out in the last 6 months. And in order to run that program, I need to rent out some space. Let them explain that in their grant application versus putting this in there. Because when we put this in there, it gets very confusing on what's the scope of work that we are interested in, if that makes sense. And I'd love to hear from Councilwoman Comer and Councilman Gaddis if that sort of helps distinguish the two things, and would you be comfortable with that?
So I guess I don't mind taking the information out. I think it just, and maybe this is a question for further down the road, but what is the review committee going to look like? And how are they going to know what their parameters are in terms of approval?
Yep.
Which review committee? The reinvestment committee, or who?
Yeah, who's reviewing these applications? Like, how is that being determined? And
Yeah.
whoever's
The grant managers, right, are reviewing the applications, and then they make a final recommendation to us as a council to say, we believe the funding you provided us should be awarded to these organizations, and we have final say over them. But in terms of full application review, that's what the grant managers are doing.
And I'm asking that they not only send us the ones that they recommend for approval, but they send us the ones they recommend for denial. So all applications that come in under this program, we would get to see them, because there could be a program that we want to fund that they did not recommend funding for. And so that's.
Ray, if you could scroll back up to the top, so just to kind of refine, because I know we've had lots of conversations around the NOFA, right? We started with, okay, let's have a NOFA for just the programs that we want to fund, and then earlier this week we said, you know what, it's going to be really difficult for us to be able to manage the disbursement of that funding and review of applications, everything as the Office of the Social Equity Council. So let's put the NOFA out to grant making organizations, foundations, and such. that can do that work for us within a set amount of time. So this NOFA is reflective of that. The definition distinction, which I appreciate. Maybe we need more clearer words, but you have the grant manager, which is who's responding to the NOFA, and then you have Jerry. What's the other term you have for the, I guess, the program applicants?
Community grant applicant.
Community grant applicants, and they're going to be applying to the grant managers. So that's sort of that overall distinction. With that change, we had there was a recommendation made that the smallest award, since this is going to grant making entities, be $500,000, and the maximum be $1 million with up to $5 million available. I guess I would stop there first and ask, are we comfortable with that? The bottom end of it being $500,000, the higher end being $1 million. Is there any opposition to that? Andrea?
Yes, not opposition, just a flag that if it's $500,000, we probably want to put a K there or something.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Sorry, you're frozen on my screen, so all I see is your virtual hand going up.
All done.
Okay.
Although
All
I
right.
think, I thought I saw Councilman Walton's hand up at one point.
Oh, no, no, but I do have a question. Good afternoon, everyone. So when we say in this 500,000 to $1 million and out of this money available, and this is what the decided upon group of reentry and youth programming.
Yeah, so that's the next section we're gonna get to.
Okay.
Give me 1 second and we'll talk
right,
through that.
thank
So
you.
to DIA is very clear. Eligible grant management applicants. So CT-based community foundations, CT-based community development corporations. My question for the council is that encompassing enough of grant making entities, or do we need to have a little bit more definition around? I'm gonna
So
take
we-
no comment. Okay. Councilman Walton.
Yeah, so when we talk about community foundations, are we talking about just the foundations like the New Haven Community Foundation New Haven or Hartford or Fairfield County, or is that supposed to encompass other grant making agencies?
It's my understanding that it includes other grant making agencies.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Can we, wouldn't it be easier to just say Connecticut-based grant-making agencies?
I think that, so there's a difference, I believe, between a foundation and a grant making agency. I don't know if you want to, if you want to just make it that broad, that's fine.
Well, I think you just said that the understanding is it includes grant-making agencies, so I don't, I just want to make sure we're wording it right.
Yeah, so I mean, I think the more broad you make it, the more folks that will apply. And I think we'll get more people who say, hey, I can do this and I'm just going to apply for it, but they may not be eligible. And I just, to keep in mind with our time frame and the limited resources that we have to review these applications. So we want to make sure that we're getting the most direct responses from the entities that we are interested in working with. So if we get, if we get 30 applications, we have to review, at least look at them to determine they're not what we're looking for. So that takes quite a bit of time.
Councilwoman Comer?
Thank you. Just wondering if we say Connecticut grant making agencies and then define what that means, because I'm a little confused by Director Clay said it's grant making agencies, but then didn't want to call them Connecticut grant making agencies. So I think if we're going to say it includes grant making agencies, maybe we just need to add a definition to that.
I would recommend putting in Connecticut based grant making agencies with a history of 5 years or more of grant making. So that you don't get someone saying, I'm a grant making agency, and it's really just a 2-person shop that's applying.
Mhm.
Are we comfortable with that? The 5 years or more?
That makes sense to me. Thank
Great.
you.
And I think then we can take out the other piece, and that keeps it broad enough but targeted enough so we're not having to deal with, folks that we probably wouldn't deem eligible.
I can clean
Okay.
this up, but if that says what you wanted to
Yep.
say.
And I think you take out the community-based development corporations because that should just fall under there then.
Okay.
Great. All right, next section. I believe is what Councilman Walton was alluding to. Sorry, did you have anything to add here?
Yeah, I just wanted to draw your eye to this here. So all grant management applicants must demonstrate experience and an ability to work in urban centers, diverse groups, management, scale of projects. So this, we also sent out a draft application. These things are included in the application.
Yep.
Okay.
Great. So last week we had spoken about reentry reintegration programs as and youth education, recreation arts being sort of the two areas. I see community reinvestment is still there. That is very, very broad of a category that's going to bring in quite a lot. I'm not sure sort of where we saw I don't know if January you had conversations over the last week that brought that back up. But again, if our goal is to be targeted, I personally would not include community reinvestment, but I would love to hear from the rest of the council, because to me, community reinvestment is what we're doing as a whole.
So some of this I was asked to include. So this piece specifically here, Sabir, and I put it in this category. It could go in another category. But the other thought behind the community reinvestment was, and maybe we could be a little bit more targeted in this, but there are community facilities that are not owned by municipalities. They're owned by an association, a group that have urgent need, that have not been able to raise money to make facility upgrades and code compliances. So if we can put some money into replacing the roof of a community organization or a community facility, adding a handicap, bathroom, repaving their parking lot, that might be something. If a community is in the works of putting together a community garden, so the food desert gets around that. So it's kind of doing those things that are community projects that could happen this summer and
Got it.
going
So
forward.
again, I still don't think that it makes sense to fit in there, but I'm gonna pass it on. I know some hands are up. So first Councilman Comer and then Councilman Gaddis.
Thank you. To you, Madam Chair. Yeah, again, once again, I feel like there are plenty of funding opportunities for, folks to get their roofs fixed and do some of these other things. I think the organizing and empowerment that language can be added to the youth education, recreation, and arts, as well as the reentry, reintegration. I'm not in disagreement with the food deserts. I'm just thinking that somewhere, if we decide to remove community reinvestment, maybe we can put it somewhere else. But I'm struggling with paying for facilities needs, because to me that doesn't define, I'm just one person, but community reinvestment in the ways that we're trying to think outside of the box, be a little entrepreneurial in how we approach this work.
So a little bit of my thought process around this also is, with my experience with CDBG funding, which is the federal HUD funding that goes to communities, and it goes for things like public facilities, it goes for things like community programs that serve low mod income. There is never, ever enough money to go around. So there are folks that just don't get funded because there's not enough money to be funded. And there is a perpetual waiting list for folks that are applying for these federal dollars that are designated to serve low mod income. So right now, the CDBG rounds in the state of Connecticut are happening. The decisions are being made, and there are a whole host of community facilities and community programs that will not get money, and they will not be able to stand up. So having funds available to, go ahead.
No, I was gonna say, and we've had this discussion, I think, at the last rate meeting. So
Yes.
I think the agreement that the council came to was, we recognize that, but again, in an effort to be focused, and then also recognizing that currently there's also a whole slew of ARPA funding that can address a lot of these needs that is still open and out
Exactly.
there. And there's also the community investment fund that covers it. We wanted, like, ARPA funding isn't going to, it's more brick and mortar, hard sort of costs. So it's not gonna fund the reentry or the youth education the way that we're thinking about it versus some of those hard costs you're talking about for community investment. Councilman Gaddis and then Councilman Shirley.
I'll yield to Councilman Shirley. He hasn't spoken yet. I spoke, so I'm going to stand down. Thank you for the indulgence.
Thank you. Councilman Shirley.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just a question. Well, a question and a comment. I think there is a difference between established organizations that have established relationships with funders and perhaps newer organizations that are trying to become established and haven't yet established relationships with major funders. And I'm just wondering, can we make a difference between funding, providing the kinds of funding for newer organizations that we wouldn't necessarily agree along to fund with older organizations in the way that Councilwoman Comer has described. I agree with her when it comes to the older established organizations that have relationships that can fund the basics that we're talking about, but the newer ones are more difficult. It's more difficult for them to get funding for the very things that we're talking about, leasing and that sort of thing. So I'm just wondering, is there a way that we can make a distinction between those two?
I just want to make sure I understand the question properly. So you're talking about, I think what you're saying here is organizations that have been around for a while have an easier way of getting funding for some of the things that can be funded through other sources, whereas newer organizations may not have that ease of ability to tap into those buckets. I think that's a hypothesis. I'm not sure how, what the truth on that may be. I also wonder if it's a new organization, do we know that they can actually deliver the quality programming that we're looking to make an impact within those two buckets? So that those are some of the things that I'm thinking about. More organizations isn't always a good thing in my mind, but sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say, I think the granting organization would be in a good position to make that determination as to whether they're capable. But I'm just asking because there may be organizations that are more focused on the groups we want to benefit than some of the older, more established organizations. But I mean, that's just an observation from, and I can't set particular examples right now, but I mean, my experience is that, newer ones just have a more difficult time.
And I appreciate that. Thank you. Council Member Pelka.
Thank you so much, Madam Chair. And I think that the Council Member Shirley raised a good point. One way perhaps to address that and to reflect that it is, would be to maybe as part of the criteria for respondents to the NOFA, they could provide us with their equity and grant making plans, or explain something about their array of grantees and just define their strategies for being inclusive in the grant announcement. I just thought that we could perhaps address that concern by requiring them to demonstrate to us in their response that they have a history of doing this, or it would be in a different section, but I just thought that could be something that would be worthwhile in evaluating the respondents.
I can, through you, Madam Chair, if I may, I can't see, my screen
Sure.
is full. But we did send out an application, a draft application. Member Pelka, you did not get it, but Jennifer Edwards, if you could please forward that to the council.
It was
You-
be sent to everybody.
On the committee or the whole council?
Ojala wanted me to send it to the whole committee.
Yeah, the committee, but Mark is
No,
not
the
on the list
whole,
of.
the whole,
The whole council received
Council.
it. She forwarded it.
Okay.
Yeah,
So,
we-
Member Pelka, if you would just check the application, it does ask for your experience in managing grants and the number of years, and so that's for discussion as well.
Thank you. Councilwoman Comer and then Councilman Walton.
So before I start, I just want to flag that Councilman Gaddis does still have his hand up, and it's been up for a while, so I yield to him. If he has a
Thank you for that. I just want to be very clear, and I do not want to mince words. I am not interested in being Community Development Block Grant 2.0. That is the responsibilities of municipalities and elected officials who should advocate for more better use, targeted use of those dollars. The best thing on this document that appeals to me is robotics. Our kids, whether black, brown, and white, are getting their teeth kicked in by other folks from other countries. America ranks annually 29th and in the 30s in education, specifically mathematics and science. I'm not sure why we're not talking about coding schools, AI development schools, STEM or STEAM schools, financial wellness initiatives, all this stuff about roofs. I'm a vote no so far. There's nothing that convinced me why I should vote yes for this. I know we're under a time constraint. I'm not trying to be difficult, but I'm also trying to be innovative. This is bullshit and it's not innovative.
Councilman Walton.
Yeah, I was looking at the application, so in reference to Councilman Polka's comments, I think the application does speak to what we're looking for those applicants. And I just had a question for Councilman Member Gaddis. In response, you said not supporting. When you say not supporting, do you mean all of the proposal or the part about the community reinvestment?
No, I'm not. As it's presented, I'm a no vote.
Okay, gotcha. Just wanted to clear. Thank you.
And just so you know, for the future, I'm the type of person that I don't feel it's necessary for me to explain myself to anyone. Just so you know.
Hold up. I didn't ask you. I asked you about a specific question. I didn't ask you to explain yourself.
Yeah, I
So if
got
it
you.
came off that way, that's not the intent. I was asking specifically about that section. And it was a yes or no to the response. I mean, just general to that. So it wasn't about me asking you to explain yourself.
Thank you, Councilman Walton. Councilwoman Comer, do you still have your hand up?
Yes, thank you. So I think there's a part of me that agrees with Councilman Gaddis in terms of like, what are we trying to accomplish here? And I think we could either spread ourselves so thin that we end up having little to no impact, or we could be strategic and we could be focused. I'm not sure what it is we are trying to get at here. If we're trying to make investments in communities most harmed by the war on drugs. And I will remind folks that harmed by the war on drugs for the purposes of this statute are disproportionately impacted areas. So it's not going to just be the Hartfords and the New Havens and the Bridgeports with the small nonprofits that are trying to figure things out. It is going to be any area that is currently on that list So I think we have to be very, very strategic, because otherwise we are no different than any other entity that has farmed out resources, and folks have a little bit of crumbs and the communities look exactly the same as a result.
Thank you. Councilman Walton, do you have your hand back up? So, Councilman Robertson.
I would, I think that Councilwoman Comer brilliantly articulated kind of the vision and the focus. So from the DECD perspective, we have grants out there. We have Community Investment Fund, as mentioned earlier. So there are things in place to address that. I think we do have to be very laser focused on not only just, again, identifying the communities and really digging deep within those to craft this. And I'd rather get it right and take our time. I know we're against the timeline. I'm always the first to mention following a timeline and hitting it, but I think it's really critical that we strategically get this right. And in agreement with both Councilwoman Comer and Councilwoman Gaddis, I think we've got to remain on that focus. Thank you, Chairwoman.
I'd like to recognize that Councilman Jefferson has joined the meeting and has his hand up. So Councilman Jefferson.
Through you, Madam Chair, and thank you. I was in court, and I apologize for arriving late to the meeting. At the last meeting, we talked about some specifics. Mr. Chair, Councilmember Robinson had mentioned, let's focus on DIAs. Someone had mentioned, let's use this opportunity to create a pilot program. Councilwoman Comer talked about being rather specific about re-entry. It was the executive director who had mentioned youth. And we seem to have arrived at a consensus. I think if we try hard enough, I think we can come to some sort of agreement based on the fact that we can use this as a pilot going forward. So we do get some money into the community. I'm willing to submerge any differences I might have with folks in their positions on this on this NOFA to arrive at that consensus. But I think we can do that, and I think we owe it to our communities to do that. And if folks are in agreement, let's start chipping away. Let's just agree where we don't want to go, and let's start with where Councilwoman Comer started the dialogue, and that was at reentry. And let's go from there.
Thank you, Councilman Jefferson. I'm not sure if you can see the screen, but we do have those two here on the NOFA. Community reinvestment was not removed, and I think we are now all in agreement for the third time that needs to be removed, and that we are not looking to focus on those types of projects. And we're removing the sort of seem to be some consensus on removal of the pieces that cover things like equipment and whatnot, because it was confusing on, are we just generally, funding equipment and capital improvements, or how does it tie back to the programming? So I think we've tightened it up here. I agree that we had discussed this as a pilot program, recognizing that we have the $5 to $6 million that we're looking to spend here. My question to council members is, are we, and I don't know if we need to take a vote on this to get to where we need to, but do we feel comfortable for a pilot program moving forward with these two categories? And we can broaden the definition within these categories, make sure things like robotics is included in it. I agree that we haven't spent the time to really think innovatively on how we can create the impact, but again, we need to start somewhere. And this is the pilot to help start us while the community conversations are happening, while we can build a broader scope for future things. So do we feel comfortable moving forward with this, or do we really feel strongly that we need to think about this differently? So Councilwoman Comer and then Councilman Pelko.
Thank you, through you, Madam Chair. I'm comfortable with the reentry and the youth education. I do want to, to your point, acknowledge Councilman Gaddis's point, which I think was a very good one, about workforce. And maybe it's, where we talk about future workforce under youth education, that we include something around, STEM focused or STEAM focused programming. Or include that as among the menu of options. But, in the interests of time, I don't want us to not get anything done because we're trying to get it perfect. And again, my comments were really just about wanting to be strategic and not being casting such a wide net that we have limited impact. And so those were my thoughts.
Thank you so much. To that point, Director Clay, I think if we can add in things around STEM or STEAM programming into that description, we do talk about preparing the future workforce, so it makes sense to include that component as well. Councilmember Pelka.
So yeah, I agree with through you, Madam Chair, and through you, I'd agree with what Member Comer just said. I'm in complete agreement. And what I would offer is, if we would like to build out number 2 around education and the other types of elements already including there's no reason we could not include youth under number 1 as well. Youth also may be incarcerated. Youth also may be in the justice system and be returning and reintegrating. So just wanted to offer that. I know we're at a bit of a weird position where we're feeling under pressure, but we could say justice involved youth could be a way of incorporating them, the young people who may be in the juvenile justice system, adult justice system, and are returning.
Thank you so much. Appreciate that.
Can you say that one more time, please? Justice involved youth?
Yep. I think we would call it that.
Okay.
Because some youth may remain in the juvenile justice system, some with very serious charges may be transferred to the adult system. I don't think we want to have to define those two, but this is a young person who's involved in the justice system in some capacity.
And I think you could put the justice involved youth right in the parentheses with the other focuses.
Thank you. Okay. So I'm not hearing any other questions, comments, concerns around these 2 categories. We're completely taking off the community investment piece. If there are no further questions, comments, or discussion on this, I'm going to move forward. Eligible uses of funds by grant manager, administrative cost not to exceed 10% of the grant. Closing fees and legal expenses related to the grant. I think that's quite standard. We don't expect it to be 10%. I think depending on the size of funding that an organization is managing. We discussed removing the eligible uses of funds by community grant applicants, not limited to, especially since it's a not limited to, because it causes more confusion. Non-eligible uses of funds. If we are going to keep that in, I would make sure we're specific about non-eligible uses of funds by program grant recipients. So just make sure that is clear.
Yeah, this is no one can use this, whether you're the grant manager or the community.
Okay, got it.
Grant application. This is just.
So now we're diving into grant management budget period. So my understanding is that director has had some conversations around if we are launching this and based on the timeline, we're looking at end of May to be able to award the funding to the grant managers. What type of timeline do we want to give them to stand up their individual programs for funding disbursement, which includes, the application, launching the application, collecting applications, reviewing them, doing what they need to get to the final recommendations that they make to the council. Do we want that to be a process that is completed within 6 months? I don't think the grant application period should be open for 6 months. I know there was some discussion of, having the organizations taking rolling applications, and I think that can be real messy. Especially if you're taking rolling and you're awarding funds as you go, that means the council is having to look at them as they come in, which is also challenging for us, I think. So I would recommend there is a clear start and end for all organizations and an expected date where we as a council review the final recommendations that come through the door. Additional sort of thoughts, questions, comments on that? So I would change that language to say, the grant management budget period is through December. I mean, I'd like to know from the council, when do we want to have final applications from program organizations to review? Do we want them in October? Do we want them in November? Do we want them in September? I don't think it's feasible, recognizing that the organizations would start their process in probably June in the best case scenario. You got to give them about 2 to 3 months. So June, July, August. The earliest I would say is September.
I would agree with September.
Same.
Okay, so final grant recommendations made to council by September.
30th.
Maybe it's August, end of August, so that we review at the September meeting. Otherwise, we won't be able to review until the October meeting.
I guess I'm just wondering through you, Madam Chair, if, this may sound nutty, so I'm going to apologize in advance. However, I know that there tends to be a lull across industries during the summertime. And so I'm thinking maybe September makes more sense. And then for review in October.
In October, okay.
That's just my 2 cents.
I think that's fair.
So you want, again, can you give me that?
Final grant
timeframe?
recommendations are made to the council, let's say mid-September. So that we have time to review them ahead of the October council meeting where we would vote to approve.
Okay.
And then,
Madam Chair, I'm just a little confused.
Yep.
And that's because I joined a little late here. Who are we speaking of in terms of the grant? Are we talking about those who will be doing the dispersing? Who are we talking about?
Yep. So the NOFA is going to what we're calling grant managers, right? Those are the foundations or grant making organizations. And then what we're talking about right now is those grant making organizations bringing back to us after they've gone through the whole application period for community programs to say, here are our final recommendations on who should get what funding. So that would be the program grant recipients.
Okay, so we're not allowing them to make that finding. You're suggesting that we will make that determination as to who they should disperse to.
We're allowing them to make that finding, but we want to just make sure that we as a council are having a look at and final vote on those recommendations made. It's not too dissimilar from, let's say, the process we have right now for our lottery applicants, where we have a third party reviewing them, but before we approve or reject, we have a final view on it. So we're not participating in the process, but we are getting the final report to say, yep, this makes sense. Just in case there's any kind of red flags or concerns, we're able to catch them before the funding is dispersed.
Thank you. And one last question, just so that I'm clear, these grant managers, will they have already received the funding from Social Equity Council?
Correct. Yes.
They will have already received it. Okay. All right. All right. Thank you.
This,
Additional question?
yeah, I just want to say that this section right here refers to the community grant applicants budget period. Do we want to comment on that at all? Do you want the programs that are being funded to be completed within a year, within a 2-year period, or we don't want to comment at all?
Councilman Pelka, I think, may have had his hand up for a different comment, and then
Sorry, yeah.
Councilwoman Comer.
I think if I could defer to Council Member Comer, I think she may
First.
have
Okay,
it.
go ahead.
Please, sorry.
Thank you, and thank you both. My thought process is that and I know it's not 12 months sounds like a rational time frame. I'm just thinking about from a budgeting perspective, do we want to have these funds or have them their grant run till the end of the following fiscal year? So June 30th, 2024, as opposed to a full 12 months, just for reporting purposes and facilitation as we go through this. It's just a thought.
Sorry, I don't have a thought on that. I'm sorry, but I would just, I think to the Council Member Jefferson's question, because these funds are fiscal year 2023, they must be, we must actually have a check that's actually cut for the recipient organizations before June 30th. The executive director cited the number of business days that remain. I think she's citing the date by which the books will be closed on the current fiscal year. So once the council has selected the organization to receive the reinvestment funds, an actual check will be cut to that individual entity or the multiple entities and be in their possession moving forward. That's what we need to do, understanding, when we close out the fiscal year.
Thank you. Appreciate that clarity, Councilman Member Pelka. So 12 months for program budget period, community grant applicant budget period through June 20. I think that's fair. Any additional restrictions we want to put on from a budget period perspective? Okay. No match required. And then we have a review process, which I believe there's a separate review document in terms of timeline and process. So maybe we can cover at high level, which is, the budget and proposals are submitted to the staff. Staff does initial review, makes recommendations to the committee. Committee reviews, makes final recommendations to the council. Council votes, and we are able to award the grants.
I think this is the second document that was sent out, and this is the detailed next steps. So for the entire process. So this was sent in the email along with the NOFA. So notice of grant award, assistance agreement, these are, and then a few things wanted to confirm that we can in fact provide advancements to the grant managing organizations. And I think Mark just said, yes, we can. And yeah, so you have all of this. So that's what I believe that's what you were reading from Ojala.
Mm-hmm.
Correct. Okay. So I'm just going to go back to the NOFA. And again, this is the high level time frame. This does not include, and the grant managers won't get all the detail that you all have in the second document. Those are internal processes that need to happen. But this is for their knowledge that we would be looking to fund them by during the week of May 22nd, cutting checks.
So just kind of in line with this and as well as the detailed next steps, a couple of things where I think you had some questions or discussion around. One, do we want the NOFA to be invite only? I believe we should publish it out to the public versus invite only to make it fair game. Before I continue down further, I just saw Councilman Gaddis's hand up, so I do want to defer to him.
Thank you for the indulgence, Madam Chairwoman. I agree that we should open it to the public just for a CYA tactic. We don't want to give the appearance that we're favoring any organization over another. Now, this is my mild OCD kicking in. Can we, where we have the symbol of at, change it to AT and make sure the hyphens are uniform and all that stuff is uniform? Because when you look at it, some of it is not uniform. And it's just, again, I'm sorry, it's my mild OCD. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilman
Thank you.
Gaddis.
No, I appreciate it. It's making me nuts as well.
Anything else before I continue going through? Director Clay, you'll have an exact date on the NOFA set when we should have that set before this grant application goes out.
Excuse me?
The exact date on the NOFA information session, do we have a date yet on that?
We have it scheduled for March 30th.
So that
This
would
is
be,
from here, application, hold on one second, this is, yeah, this is, something is wrong here. Oh, here it is, information session.
okay.
Then you can, I mean, I don't, the other question I have is, are members of the council going to participate in the information session with the applicants? Because it'll be when they come to ask their questions. Sabira indicated that she wanted to be involved, so the question is March 30th a convenient time from 12 to 1, or would you prefer to have it in the evening or a different date?
That works for me and I will be there.
Okay.
Please send me the invite as soon as you have it.
Yeah, we'll have to set up the Zoom and make that a part of this, add that to this
Okay.
NOFA.
I don't think it's fair to say this NOFA is going to be released today. I think you should have the release date starting Monday and make sure that that's the, okay, I see you've got a window for release. Okay, great. So that was a question on there, and then we're not doing rolling applications, so make sure to remove that from the detailed next steps. It should be a one go and they, deliver their findings to us. I think everything else makes sense. I think we've covered everything else in terms of process. Any further questions on application process? Any further questions on the application itself, which was also sent out?
No questions, just again, to Councilman Gaddis's point, if we could just make sure that there are typos, grammatical things, if there could just be a run through of that. I saw a couple, but I don't want to take up this group's time with that, so.
Thank you. Okay. So if there are no further questions on the NOFA, I'd like to entertain a motion to approve the NOFA for posting next week.
So moved.
So
I'll
moved.
sec-
Second.
All right. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstaining? Thank you so much. So NOFA should be out next week. And we have an idea of the application review process, which was item 4 on the agenda. And we've made our recommendations. We do have a meeting on the calendar for Monday, where I would like to, on the agenda, discuss what our next steps are in terms of the process with the state legislature in requesting additional funds. And that should be on everyone's calendar. Councilman Gaddis, you have your hand up.
I know, thank you. I know there are some issues around us having a strategic planning session, But some of these issues could be satisfied or taken care of if we kind of got together and worked out some of these things, especially with some of our strong personalities. I'm very well aware of sometimes I could be a pricky guy. I get that. And I feel sometimes in these meetings that are public facing, by the way, we spend a considerable amount of time building Rome when sometimes it's just good to get together as friends and colleagues, let our hair down, and really just kick back and chop it up and ask these tough questions of each other about the vision and where we want to go. Sometimes, while it is appropriate to be transparent, sometimes I just feel that we're making the soup and the sausage in front of everyone, and I'm not sure that's the best forum. So I really would advocate somehow, some way for some sort of strategic planning meeting, especially dealing with the large dollars we deal with, so that we don't have to do it in 1 hour going back and forth with each other, if that
Yeah.
makes sense. Thank you.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And I think we are long overdue for it. And I believe that we've gone through all the things needed to ensure that we can do that without it needing to be a public meeting. And so I would ask Director Clay and Chairman Robertson to, I know we've got a council meeting coming up next week. If you can just provide an update on that at the council meeting on Tuesday, along with tentative dates for May or June. We definitely need to make that happen so we have a strong strategic plan for the coming fiscal year.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. We will be on that.
Great. Anything else for the good of the order? Now,
Madam
1
Madam
hour.
Chairwoman. No, I just want to make sure that my colleague and friend, Councilman Walton, knows that my comments weren't directed towards him. It's just one of those days. So I apologize to my good brother, and I'm glad you're here participating and giving us that energy. Thank you.
Listen, brother, no need. I appreciate that. No need to apologize. We just try and get the work done, brother.
Thank you, Councilmember Pelko.
Thank you. I just feel like Madam Chair, I think you deserve praise too for this meeting. I mean, there were points in this meeting when like we were going to go off the rails, and by that I mean just really needing to delve in. But you do a really good job keeping us focused on where we need to wind up in the limited time that we do have. And you never seem rattled, and you really keep us focused. And I think that's a really special trait that you have, and I can't thank you enough for that. I agree with Councilmember Gaddis. I really like the directness of his communication at times. It does help to move us along as well. Maybe part of why it can feel strained and stilted is that we're virtual for everything. And so there is a way to keep an open meeting and be in a room. And I think that would drop a lot of defenses and barriers that result from us being on Zoom. I'm also interested in strategic planning process. I just don't know. I just would like to hear like how we resolve complying with open meetings and still have that. We are under a lot of scrutiny as a full council, and I just think ironing out all those details ahead of time so that we can have the strategic planning process and be consistent with the policy would really add the comfort level to people participating in that meeting. So you're right that this has been something that's been coming up repeatedly, right? Having a retreat, a strategic planning process, and it hasn't come to fruition. That may be because we're trying to resolve these open meetings compliance issues. But I want to express I share it, and I think we can iron out those details. Everyone can enter into such a strategic planning meeting with greater clarity and confidence and comfort.
Thank you, Councilman Pelko. All right, if nothing else, I almost had a perfect meeting there, Councilmember Gaddis. Almost had a perfect meeting there. 102. I think we have a motion to adjourn. Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Have
Take
a
care,
wonderful,
everyone.
have a wonderful weekend, everyone. Take care.
Right, thank you.
Bye-bye.